Okami's unique art style helped it garner attention back on the PS2, but it was its fusion of art and gameplay that made it a cult classic. Despite the critical acclaim, a follow-up seemed highly unlikely due to low sales, but Capcom defies those expectations with Ōkamiden, a direct sequel to the 2006 classic. Does it manage to capture the essence of its predecessor, or is it unable to step outside of its looming shadow? Nine months after Amaterasu and Susanoo saved Nippon from the menace of Orochi, evil once again threatens the delicate peace. This time it's up to a young pup named Chibiterasu and his pint-sized partner Kuni to save the day. The overarching story starts strong, but eventually fades into the background, staying off the radar until the final hours. Ōkamiden is instead defined by a few smaller tales that focus on characters you encounter. They'll frequently tug on your heartstrings, and the ending provides an emotional gut check that's well worth the long journey. Ōkamiden is very similar to its predecessor, going so far as to revisit similar locations and venues. You'll occasionally retread old stomping grounds, but enough has been changed to keep things fresh. For those unfamiliar with the original, the game's structure shares much in common with the Zelda series: a vast overworld, a handful of towns, and plenty of dungeons. However, the world feels more claustrophobic than before. Environments are sectioned off into smaller zones, which somewhat breaks the illusion of a seamless world. There's still a good measure of exploration, though, with plenty of secrets to discover. The game's at its best when you're knee-deep in puzzles in one of the numerous dungeons. You'll have to turn to your celestial brush powers and your partner's unique abilities to overcome obstacles, and lying hidden in nearly every corner are treasures to uncover. Lasting upwards of an hour at a time, the dungeons give Zelda a run for its money. Though most are noticeably light on enemies, combat isn't one of Ōkamiden's high points. Ōkamiden begins to fall a bit flat about halfway through the game. It feels like the developers tried to artificially pad the game with increasingly repetitive and mundane objectives. The pacing also begins to deviate from the finely honed balance that defines earlier segments, making the late stretch somewhat tedious, though it ultimately finds its footing and corrects course to finish strong. Additionally, the experience manages to avoid excessive backtracking, eventually introducing a warp system for easy travel when you find yourself in the need to revisit those old stomping grounds. You'll get your money's worth out of Ōkamiden's 20-hour adventure, and with plenty of side quests and secrets to unearth, it'll be a while before you put it down. It doesn't quite live up to the breadth and depth of its predecessor, but much like the game's hero, it's a smaller beast, whose bite is as big as its bark. Capcom already tapped the Wii's motion controls to enhance the original's paintbrush mechanics, but the Nintendo DS stylus delivers the missing ingredient: tactile feedback. Making swift, precise strokes is simple and intuitive, but the game can be inconsistent in accurately recognizing your input. There are times where you'll trace an object to perfection, only to have the game reject your efforts. In other instances, crude marks will trigger the desired effect. It's little more than a nuisance most of the time, but there are certain crucial instances where failed strokes can be quite frustrating, especially when ink starts to run in short supply. On top of drawing lines and shapes to trigger attacks and special abilities, you'll also use the stylus to command and guide your partner. You're still just drawing lines in the end, but using this interface to trigger your allies' unique abilities adds an additional factor to consider during both fights and puzzles. There is a slight drawback, though. In rare situations, the camera provides a less than optimal view, which makes it overly difficult to draw accurately. The teamwork mechanic expands further by allowing each companion to dismount from Chibiterasu and act in tandem to solve puzzles or tackle more challenging opponents, though you're restricted to the immediate area while separated. Though there's certainly a heavy emphasis on the celestial brush, Ōkamiden also relies on more traditional gameplay mechanics. Basic combat is conducted with a single button, which lets you string together attack combos, and the system would be somewhat shallow if not for the brush mechanics. You'll obtain 3 different weapons over the course of the game, each of which can be upgraded. However, you can't combine them like you could in the previous game, and they don't offer much variety either way. Ōkamiden's storybook visuals aren't quite on the level of the originals, but it's easily one of the better looking games on the DS regardless. Capcom is squeezing every last ounce out of the aging hardware. There are a few visual irregularities every now and then, but this is a textbook example of how amazing art direction can carry a simple, technical production. The soundtrack is moving and really enhances the atmosphere, and the gibberish that serves as a stand-in for voice work certainly adds some charm. Much of what made Ōkami so special has been preserved and even refined in the sequel, but Ōkamiden slips on the execution front a little too often, preventing it from rising above its predecessor. Nonetheless, it's still a beautiful game and a worthy successor that both newcomers and veteran Celestial painters will enjoy.